Welcome to Stereo 3D Productions and this first impressions review of the VIVE Cosmos. Second generation VR has been gradually rolling in this last year, and I've been carefully looking at what's coming out because there's already a lot of options, and I want to make sure that the one I pick suits me, not just for a few playthroughs, but for years to come. I'm looking for a good balance between durability, reliability, ease of use, and comfort over long periods of time. Of course, I'm also looking for something that raises the bar substantially when it comes to display resolution, or at the very least, an increase in perceived amount of image detail. The first kits that entered the game didn't really jive with me. Thanks to my employer, I was able to try out the Oculus Rift S, and while I saw many good things from that kit, I also ran into a few problems, like controller tracking that completely failed on me a few times. Things like that make me worried that owning one of these would give me headaches. Not to mention, I thought the resolution increase on that one was really nothing to write home about, a very half-assed effort on the part of Oculus. Another of the next-gen Oculus kits I got to try was the Quest. And while the Quest impressed me a lot, at the time, Oculus Link wasn't on the radar, and I personally have no use for standalone VR, so I decided to pass. When the Valve Index dropped, it seemed it would be the kit for me, but to my absolute shock, their initial release wouldn't ship to Canada, so I wouldn't even be able to consider that as an option. And what made the situation even more difficult is no one had any clue when Valve would finally expand their reach to allow Canadians to buy the system. This sort of forced my hand into waiting a little longer, because I knew there was another headset on the horizon, the VIVE Cosmos. Many aspects of this new solution were appealing to me. First, there wouldn't be the need to use external trackers with this system. Second, on paper, the resolution increase seemed larger than any second-gen kit released up to this point. And third, those controllers looked like the kind of input mechanism that would entirely make up for the god-awful first-generation Vive wands. Normal controllers with thumbsticks and a full set of buttons. The Cosmos really did seem to be like a good fit for me, not to mention that while I wasn't a fan of the first Vive controllers, I was in fact a fan of the headset itself, along with the comfort wearing it over long periods of time. The Cosmos, being another Vive headset, I figured I could expect the same type of qualities this time around. So, on September 13, 2019, I'm up late in the night, or early morning, depending on what kind of sleep cycle you have, and I spot a tweet from HTC. It's the announcement I've been waiting for. The VIVE Cosmos is up for pre-order, and it starts shipping in early October. I went ahead and placed my order, hoping I was doing the right move for my journey into second-generation VR. Amazingly, the unit was shipped on October 2 and arrived at my doorstep only 2 days later. I'm not exactly sure if it's because I ordered so quickly after the pre-order announcement, but damn, that was some amazingly fast service by HTC. Physically speaking, this headset is right about the same as the Vive Pro, but with a few slight differences. First, it uses this halo-type strap with a large forehead padding, which reminded me a lot of the PlayStation VR's head strap. Second, the faceplate is a bit different, and of course there are 6 tracking cameras while the Pro only has 2 forward-facing cameras. Third, because this thing has a halo strap with a large forehead padding, the face foam has no top part. So it's basically 2 Velcro detachable pieces, one for your left cheek and one for your right cheek. The only thing that really bothered me here is the large forehead padding and the back padding are not Velcro detachable. I am a huge proponent of Velcro detachable foams because it makes them easy to clean and swap out. For my original HTC Vive, I ended up owning 6 replacement face foams, making sure that I could always be gaming with a clean headset. And with the Oculus Rift, I eventually bought a VR cover kit with multiple face foams so that I could again ensure I'd always have a clean foam to swap to. It's a good thing that these large pads aren't made of a material that's too porous, because that leaves them easy to clean while they're attached to the headset. My only real complaint here is I really wish manufacturers included more than one face foam with their kits. It would be nice to have at least a pair of them in the box. Now, I did notice one immediate worry while looking at the headset. The headphones look an awful lot like those that come with the VIVE Pro, and if they're anything similar, I already knew they would probably suck. It is a shame, because the way they make these, they're actually a pretty comfortable fit, and they seem pretty sturdy. Just, I fear the audio quality would again lack with this unit's integrated audio. Last thing I noticed about this headset, and it did bring another little worry before I even used it, these lenses are Vive's standard set. They're identical to the Vive Pros, and so while I could expect the same level of image clarity as in that headset, I'd have to be ready to accept that the field of view in this unit would be just about as tight as in the Pro. The one encouraging factor here is the specs mentioned the Cosmos uses twin 1440 by 1700 90Hz RGB LCD displays, resulting in a total resolution of 2880 by 1700, the highest resolution increase so far in the mainstream second generation manufacturers being Oculus, HTC, and Valve. Perhaps through these screens I could hope to be getting a slight field of view boost along with a big increase in pixel density. Now, in the box I also found something that I've gotten familiar with when it comes to HTC kits: a damn link box. I'm surprised Vive haven't gone around these link boxes yet. I honestly think them and PlayStation VR are the only ones left on the market that do this. In this case, we're talking a link box that's identical to the Vive Pros along with the cables to connect it. One USB 3 wire, one DisplayPort cable, and the AC power adapter lead. The one thing in the box that doesn't have a single thing to do with any past Vive kit in the best way possible are the Cosmos controllers. When it comes to ergonomics with VR controllers, this is what I'm talking about. No more cheap, unreliable, flimsy trackpads. These controllers have thumbsticks. No more mushy, shoddy grip buttons. These controllers have nice, big grip triggers. No more lack of buttons. These controllers have an A and B button on the right and an X and Y on the left. Grip triggers, main triggers, and bumper buttons on each. Thumbsticks you can press down and a Vive button on both controllers. This is an absolute far cry from the god-awful original Vive wands, which I actually hated with a passion, not only for their lack of input buttons, but for their overall flimsiness and their use of these abhorrent trackpads instead of simple thumbsticks. The Cosmos controllers are indeed an enormous step up in terms of input capability. Alright, I can promise you that this is going to be the shortest hardware setup section of any headset first impressions review I've done in the past. And this is a pretty good thing to say here, considering we'll have to use a link box. That's right. Stereo 3D Productions viewers, I present to you Pandora's Box. Pandora's Box, I present to you Stereo 3D Productions viewers. Say hi to each other. Alright, this is a big step up over the original HTC Vive where we had 3 connections to make on the headset side of this box. This time around we only have 1 to make. So you grab the singular cable that comes out of the VIVE Cosmos, you plug it on this side, and as far as the headset goes, we are done. The next thing, you're going to need your AC adapter, which you plug in here and then into your wall. Then the DisplayPort cable, which goes from here and into your computer. And finally, the USB 3 cable, which goes from here and also into your computer. And at this point, you're done. Almost ready to go. Don't do what I did, which is forgetting to press this little blue button here. That's right, you have to turn this link box on. So you press this button, there's going to be a light that's going to turn on here, and now you're all set. Now, once the hardware is all connected, you're almost ready to go. Just fire up Steam VR and... wait. No. See, once I had everything plugged in, I excitedly launched Steam VR, having skipped a very large step, so I found myself wondering why it wasn't picking up my headset. Turns out that with the VIVE Cosmos, you need to install what I've come to call middleman runtimes, the same type of software you need to install when you use the Pimax with Steam VR. For the Cosmos, you'll need to download a tool called VIVE Console, which will serve as a middleman between your headset and Steam VR. VIVE Console is a pretty simple program, easy to install and with a few settings of its own. Now, I would go over all these settings one by one, but they're rather straightforward and there's nothing really special to point out other than maybe the video tab where you can enable motion compensation to run on under-spec systems. It's some kind of a synchronous space warp, I assume, and a button to launch a mirror VR feature, something that actually surprised me. I didn't end up using this mirror VR since I already have success using Steam VR's VR display feature. You start the software and a window comes up showing you the status of your headset and the two controllers. Once the window comes up, it'll fire up your Cosmos, launch Steam VR, and you'll be ready to go. Of course, the first time you run the program, it'll prompt you to go through the setup. It starts off fairly typical as far as my experience with new VR kits go. It guides you through the hardware connections you have to make, then it invites you to do a room setup. Now, the room setup was a little bit unique to me, mostly because I have little experience with inside-out tracked headsets. So first you stand in the center of your play area and you repeatedly look right, then down, then left, over and over until the scan progress completes. Now, I've heard that this step has given a few people some problems, notably that you can get an error about low lighting, preventing the process from completing. Hearing about this was a surprise to me because while I did get some low light warnings long after going through the room setup, despite having far from the brightest lighting at my place, I never did get that error during a scan. I went through this process at least 4 times and by now not once did it fail to complete. Furthermore, I do believe that with the recent updates VIVE have been pushing out, it's very likely that this room scan has gotten a lot more reliable. And so those of you who were getting a low light error are probably able to complete the process by now. Once the scan is done, all that's left to do is first adjust your floor level by pushing it down with the controllers, and finally mark your play area with this laser pointer-like mechanic, and voila, you're ready to go. And VIVE Console will throw you into its own home-type VR lobby software known as Origin. The VIVE Console may be a piece of software similar to PyTool, but the process here is day and night. While PyTool gave me absolute hell getting my tracking to work, something that I do believe, by the way, has improved since I tried that headset, the Cosmos software never ever failed to properly start up my headset and my room scale tracking. It's a simple, reliable program for what it is, and it has yet to cause me any big problem getting started with the Cosmos. Each time I used it, it worked exactly as it should. Now, before we get on with the gameplay section of this video, I have a few things to brief you on. First off, there are a few things I tried with the kit before I even started recording. I first tried Tilt Brush only because I wanted to see if the motion controller tracking was steady enough to draw with, and overall the experience was pleasant and I didn't notice any major problems. The next thing I tried is Beat Saber because I wanted to further explore the motion controller tracking, and also because I wanted to see how these headphones' audio sounded like. When it comes to tracking, everything went well, but Beat Saber did confirm to me one thing I feared. These are indeed the exact same headphones as the VIVE Pros, and they're just as bad. Their only redeeming factor is that they can be loud without distorting the audio. But their enormous downside is they've got a sound I could only describe as hollow and muddy. Definitely nothing up to the standards I've gotten used to with the first Oculus Rift. Something else that I noticed during these 2 brief tests was this headset's field of view is another thing it shares in common with the Vive Pro. It's tight. They say 110 degrees, but honestly this feels more like 90, maybe 100, but not a shred more. It's not something that bothers me enormously, but I do wish Vive had listened to the negative feedback about the Vive Pro and taken action on this front. The good thing here is it seems the lenses are using the screen surface efficiently, because I also noticed an enormous increase in pixel density, which I guess is the positive trade-off to a low field of view, since the lenses are squishing the screen's lovely pixels into the viewport. Next and last thing I tried outside of recording any video is iRacing. In this test, I wanted to see if the tighter field of view would hinder driving simulation, and I also wanted to find out if this visibly increased resolution would help with distant detail, something that really helps when you're driving really fast and require a lightning-quick reaction to your surroundings. Having seen iRacing in the Oculus DK1, the Oculus DK2, the Oculus Rift, the HTC Vive, the HTC Vive Pro, and the Pimax 8K, I can safely say that this is the best I have seen this simulator look in any headset. And the field of view, well, it's enough to drive with, even enough to race with, but I do wish it had about 15% more in there for a more optimal situational awareness. There was one recurring problem that I noticed with the Cosmos. I had its audio device set as my default playback device in Windows. Actually, the Cosmos registers 2 audio devices, so I made one of them my default. While running iRacing, suddenly my audio died out completely. The only solution to get it back was to restart my runtimes and reselect one of the 2 devices as my default, only to have the same problem happen moments later. I found out that out of the 2 playback devices the Cosmos registered, if I disabled the one I wasn't using while making the other one my default, this issue would go away. But audio would still momentarily cut off at random intervals for about 5 to 10 seconds at a time. The audio suddenly would go silent and just would come back shortly after. Now, these 3 tests I did were carried out in quick succession and involved very short play sessions. I was only dipping my toes in the realm of the Cosmos. Now that I had an idea what I was getting into, I got my recording set up in place and opted to start with Arizona Sunshine, which I not only hadn't played in a long time, but also had the Dead Man DLC to try out. Arizona Sunshine would help me determine how well these motion controls do for gunplay, in addition to showing me how sustained room scale play feels with this kit. Next thing I picked for this first session was Skyrim VR. With Skyrim, I'd be able to evaluate a more broad use of the controllers as this game features melee and archery, and I'd also get a deeper look into overall room scale gameplay with the Cosmos and likely would get a very good idea of how good graphics will look with this increased display resolution. The next 2 games on my list were played in a second session, a little over 1 month after the first one. By then, Vive had pushed quite a few updates to their console software, and a lot of the issues I experienced during my first recordings were now either greatly improved or completely eliminated. Yes, it looks like the annoyances with low-light tracking have been almost completely eliminated, and major problems like 2-handed rifle gunplay have been vastly improved, along with overall aiming precision. Another fix I quickly noticed and very much appreciated is the audio cutoffs stopped happening. It's clear that Vive have been keeping track of all the issues because they seem to be doing something about each and every problem I previously ran into. For this session, I first played Alien Isolation. This is another game that I've seen in the Oculus DK1, the Oculus DK2, the Oculus Rift, the HTC Vive Pro, and the Pimax 8K. This game has a survivor mode with a map called The Basement, a map that I've come to use as a sort of litmus test for all sorts of factors, from testing hardware upgrades to new recording techniques, and especially trying out new headsets to look for any improvements in terms of resolutions, display, tracking, and overall performance. I played this map in the Cosmos and followed through with Scorched Earth, another survivor mode map, one that I had never played yet. Both playthroughs were not only recorded for this video, but were published in an Alien Isolation Let's Play video as well. Finally, I finished off the second recording session by playing Fallout 4 VR. I may not have played Fallout 4 with that many headsets, but I've come to know it very well, and so I would quickly be able to confirm the good and the bad of the VIVE Cosmos. Again, just like with the Alien Isolation playthroughs, this recording was also published as a Fallout 4 VR Let's Play episode. I need to note that while looking for games to try, I did run into a few issues. For example, initially I also wanted to play The Forest, but upon launching that game, to my great dismay, the motion controllers were simply not recognized by the game. No, it's not that the buttons or sticks didn't work, the controllers wouldn't even track. The next issue I ran into is I needed to find a special controller profile for Skyrim VR, since that game would initially detect the VIVE Cosmos as a standard VIVE with the original wands, and so the thumbsticks and the ABXY buttons were not responding. Fortunately for Skyrim, I found a controller profile online that I was able to copy into the game's folder in order to get it working. The last issue I ran into was with Fallout 4 VR, which had the same problem as Skyrim. Again, fortunately, I found a patch online that I was able to copy into the game's folder to resolve the problem. It's a bit disconcerting to see such compatibility issues. The good thing is I was able to resolve 2 out of 3 of these problems, but honestly, I don't think it makes much sense to have to deal with this in the first place. I've seen people in forums debate on who's to blame for this. Is it VIVE? Is it Steam VR? Is it because of the game's developers? Well, if you ask me, I think the fault lies mostly on Steam VR. See, the onus is on the runtimes to tell the game what your VR system's capabilities are. I'm not sure how, for example, Fallout 4 VR would be expecting trackpads when Steam VR clearly recognizes the VIVE Cosmos and its controllers, and thus should be capable of passing this information onto any game correctly. Then again, each case is in fact exceptional. Some games are made with generic VR rigs capable of adapting to any kit, and other games will spawn different rigs depending on the VR system you're using. I'm starting to think that a lot of games have gone with the latter approach, which introduces quite a few problems with compatibility for new headsets and kits. In the end, I did get to record and enjoy over 6 hours of gameplay with the VIVE Cosmos for this video, and it's time to go over how it all went. For the first part of my journey into the Cosmos, I figured Arizona Sunshine would be an excellent pick. See, before this kit even launched, I had read from some early reviews that the inside-out tracking could sometimes lack precision. See, this kit, unlike any other inside-out tracked kit I've tried, doesn't make use of infrared to track the motion controllers, rather it uses visible light instead, and I was a bit worried that this may be a problem for VIVE on the long run. I needed to put this worry away as quickly as possible, and trying out a game that relied on accurate aim seemed like the best way to do that. Before I even left the game's lobby, I already noticed one big technical issue with the motion controller tracking. Upon trying to eat the beef patty inside the fridge, I noticed that tracking would momentarily freak out when I got my hand too close to the headset. Look, it's not common to hold your hand up so close to a headset. Normally you'll be doing the opposite in room scale games, reaching out far from you, but it was a little worrying to discover such an issue so early in. However, I kept a positive mindset and hoped the issue wouldn't hurt gameplay too much, and I braved on. I went ahead and launched the Dead Man DLC, which I had been gifted to by my friend Eincro. Upon loading into the game world, as much as I really wanted to test out gunplay right away, I had to stop for a moment because I noticed how absolutely great the graphics looked. Just like my brief tests before starting these recording sessions, I noticed the pixel density in this headset is vastly superior. It's still hard for me to understand, but in many ways this display is actually sharper than even the Pimax 8K. It's quite a sight to behold when you've been one of the earliest adopters of VR, seeing resolution go from 800p all the way to 1700p, going through so many different types of displays, always yearning to get beyond that old VR screen door effect, only to finally stumble upon a display clarity that not only doesn't have screen door effect, but also outputs such a well-defined image that any graphical shortcomings now lie on the game you're running rather than the type of displays you're using. Arizona Sunshine, despite its simplistic world design, looked absolutely amazing. After marveling over the quality of the displays for a moment, I went on to try what I had been wanting to test out: gunplay. Sure enough, this is where I noticed how motion controller tracking really isn't perfect with this kit. First off, there's a slight, and I mean ever so slight, lack in precision that will often result in your gun's vertical angle varying just enough that you completely miss an otherwise obvious shot. This didn't happen to the point of completely ruining the gunplay, but it did cause me to waste ammo on a few occasions. Pair this with the fact that this game has a strange, somewhat erratic hit detection, and I ended up often wondering if it was either me aiming like crap, the tracking cheating me, or the game just deciding my headshot didn't hurt enough. The bottom line though, and this is the most important, as far as my playthrough of Arizona Sunshine goes, things went quite normally for the most part, and gunplay really wasn't bad at all. A little tracking fault here and there didn't stop me from fully enjoying my playthrough. Now, about midway through this, I did actually encounter a scenario that proved to be way too much for this kit to handle: two-handed rifles. This is a mechanic I've seen quite a few times by now and never had any problems with. You pick up a gun that shoots best when held with two hands. But see, when you pretend hold the gun with two hands, you end up with the two controllers directly in line with each other in front of your face. And this is where it all falls apart for the Cosmos. Since the tracking cameras all originate from the same point, your face, having both controllers in line in front of you causes one to occlude the other, and so the tracking on the controller further from your face will dip in accuracy, to the point where its position will just start randomly jumping around by a few inches in the game. When I first picked up this two-handed rifle, I took a moment to try and find an angle that would work, but I simply couldn't get it to stay put and aim the way I'd want to. It's a good thing that the game let me shoot this gun with one hand just as well. Not only was it a great weapon to mow down zombies with, even at a close range, but had it required me to use two hands, I simply would not have been able to use it. It's safe to say that two-handed guns are this VR kit's Achilles heel. Aside for the two-handed gun problem, I didn't really run into any persistent tracking issues. It almost seemed as if the longer I played, the better tracking got. I know this probably doesn't make sense, but it's just an impression I got as the kit grew on me. Furthermore, I kept having to stop every now and then in order to absorb the fact that the image clarity was so very much superior to any VR headset I had tried before. Having my Steam VR super sampling set to 115%, I was also impressed at how good performance was. I would have expected a noticeable dip in how smooth the game runs because of the headset's increased demand for resolution and the fact that I was using a bit of super sampling, but those expectations, to my great pleasure, did not materialize at all. This is probably the smoothest I've seen Arizona Sunshine run, which is a surprise given all these factors combined with my now higher resolution recording settings. Towards the end of the playthrough, I did notice one issue that bothered me a lot: the forehead padding on the head strap. Despite looking a lot like the one on the PlayStation VR, which I had found comfortable, started feeling really bad. I'd describe the feeling as a sort of rug burn on my forehead. The reason why this bothered me is 1 hour of gameplay is not a long session as far as I go with virtual reality. In fact, it's quite short. The last time I felt such short-term discomfort with VR was with the Oculus Rift and its stock face foam, which would conduct the headset's heat so efficiently it felt like the faceport was irradiating my skin. In this case, it was a different type of discomfort, not brought on by heat, but rather by the forehead padding's contact on my skin. I figured at this point, having just gotten started, that I'd have to learn to adjust the strap better before starting a long play session. There is one thing we regular VR users have come to take for granted, and this would be the realistic impression of depth perception. See, this headset's improved resolution directly affects the quality of the stereoscopic 3D output. The world scale in this unit is one of the best I've ever seen. If the game you're playing is doing it right, the size of the world, the objects, and the characters around you will feel absolutely right. Everything in Arizona Sunshine felt just right, from the environment all the way to the props and the enemies. Depth perception and the impression of scale and mass were spot on, giving for a very believable depiction of a zombie apocalypse. Now, since the audio cutoff problem has since been fixed by VIVE, I'll only bring up the issue briefly, but during this hour of gameplay, the audio really did cut out often. It never completely died, but every 5 minutes or so I'd lose the game's sound for roughly 5 seconds. It was annoying, but like I said earlier, it's something that VIVE did fix, so I no longer have to worry about it. Bottom line for Arizona Sunshine is I ended up playing for a little over 1 hour, and despite the issues I encountered here and there, I did have a great time going through this DLC, and I didn't run into any deal breakers along the way. Sure, I did wish controller tracking could be better, and I realized this was a bit under par, but the thing that counts is I was easily able to forget about that factor several times as I was progressively absorbed by the game and simply focusing on getting through its challenges and having a good time. The next thing I launched for my exploration of the Cosmos was Skyrim VR. Now, I do have to mention I made a mistake with my camcorder shortly after recording this portion of gameplay, and so my Skyrim gameplay won't feature any face cam. I know, it's been a really long time I haven't made this kind of mistake, and I wish I hadn't because there are a few things I was hoping to demonstrate from this gameplay regarding motion controller tracking. Now, despite this mistake, I still have the gameplay video itself, and I do have a few important things to go over with this playthrough. Now, I mentioned earlier in this video that I had to use a special controller profile for this game to work with the Cosmos. See, without this, Skyrim VR was detecting the VIVE Cosmos as a regular VIVE kit, and thus, the thumbsticks and the A, B, X, Y buttons wouldn't respond. Evidently, this would make the game impossible to play. So I went online and searched to see if other people were having the same issue. I stumbled upon a Steam forum post where someone with the name of Movie Makin' Mitch replied with a link to a controller profile that could be downloaded and copied into the game's folder. I followed the user's instructions, and sure enough, the next time I launched the game, my Cosmos' controller mapping was now almost identical to that of the Oculus Touch. This makes sense since the Cosmos controllers have an almost identical set of buttons, the only difference being an additional bumper button on each controller. If you're running into the same issue as I did, I'm going to post a link to this Steam forum post in the description so you can use that solution for yourself. With the controls issue out of the way, I wanted to go ahead and load my save game, but again, something stopped me dead in my tracks. Boy, does this game's title screen look good in this headset. I had to once again take a brief moment to absorb how much more detail this headset provides and how so very good it makes this game look. I tried to get over how fine the image looked and loaded my save game, but once again, as soon as I spawned in the game world, I needed yet another moment to drink it all in. I am really appreciating this pixel density. As I started walking around in the game world, I did notice one of the headset's downsides. I don't know exactly why, but in this game, the tightness of the field of view felt more prominent. The game itself isn't projecting any less or more of a field of view than any other, so I'm assuming the game's world makes you more prone to want to move your eyes around and thus results in you noticing the edges of your field of view more easily. This shortcoming is far, far from a deal breaker, but for VR players that prefer a large field of view over increased pixel density, they may find this to be a problem. For me, well, I was so awestruck by the image definition that I was beyond ready to accept the tighter field of view. Right off the bat, I had once again one big worry with motion controller tracking. See, I love the bows in Skyrim. Actually, I just love archery in VR. But now we have a problem. Just like the two-handed gun in Arizona Sunshine, shooting a bow in Skyrim would require me to put my hands directly in front of each other, and as you can see here, this causes the far hands tracking to randomly skip around, thus making aim virtually impossible. Was I going to ever be able to play this the way I want to? Well, I may not have resolved this headset's biggest weakness, but I did find a workaround so I could use the bow. See, in Skyrim, once you've grabbed the bow's string by pressing the trigger and pulling back, in my case, with my right hand, you can move that hand out of the way while holding down its trigger button, aim with the hand you're holding the bow with, in my case, the left hand, and simply release the right hand trigger when you're ready to shoot. Since you don't have to have both hands directly in line with one another in front of your headset at the moment you're shooting, you're basically aiming your shot by pointing with your left hand, with the right hand out of the way and its trigger pressed down. I quickly realized that I could put my worry about using the bow in Skyrim aside because it wouldn't be an issue at all. Skyrim gave me a good long dive into sustained gameplay with this kit, and to this point was the most enjoyable thing I had done in the Cosmos. I had to periodically remind myself that I wasn't just playing a game for the hell of it, but rather that I was there to further analyze the hardware. Often the game would just draw me in completely, and I'd just let it give me a show, enjoying every slightest little moment. The control mapping I was given did have one big shortcoming. The take and drop keys for inventories would repeat press if held down, and so even with the quickest, slightest tap of these buttons, your character would end up either taking everything from an inventory when you meant to only take one item, and would end up dropping several items instead of just dropping the one thing you had selected. While this isn't really the fault of the kit, but rather a problem with the controller mapping I was using, and ultimately the fault of Bethesda for not pushing any updates to support current headsets, this did prove to be a recurring problem to the point where I started simply abandoning a lot of loot I could have picked up, and on several occasions, despite being very careful, ended up being encumbered by objects I had unwittingly picked up due to this spam press issue. In this playthrough, I was much more careful with the tightness of the head strap. I wanted to see if I could find the right balance, not so tight as to feel like my forehead is getting skinned, and not so loose as to have the headset wobble about as I move my head. Paying attention to this really did pay off, because in slightly over 2 hours of gameplay, the discomfort didn't reach anywhere near the levels I had with Arizona Sunshine. Sure, I could feel it at the end of my playthrough, but it was a far cry from what I had last time. This was a reassuring step forward because honestly to me, sustained fit and comfort in VR is far more important than even motion controller tracking precision. If you can't wear the kit for long periods of time because the head strap hurts, you've kinda got yourself a real deal breaker. By the way, something funny I noticed about inside-out tracking while playing this game. I'm recording that playthrough for that video, right? So I'm making a lot of commentary, mostly notes, just for myself for when I make this very video. And at one point, in my mind, I strongly believed I was at least generally facing my camera and microphone, but later realized that I had my back completely turned to them for a very, very long time. Yes, it actually looks like inside-out tracking really has the ability to have you completely escape to the point of totally losing track of where you actually are. Now, there's something really cool about a game like this for VR. See, VR being one of the best ways to reproduce depth perception, it's in games like Skyrim that you'll get to see this aspect in all its glory. From small detail like props, furniture, fauna, and animals, all the way to enormous, imposing structures like castles and underground passageways with large empty rooms, Skyrim has one of those game environments that not only benefit from stereoscopic 3D depth perception, but utilizes it to the maximum of its potential. I had to stop several times while walking around in this game world because I couldn't believe how absolutely real everything looked. Yes, we're talking about a game released in 2011, one that has been ported on almost every system in existence, but running it in VR on a headset with this much pixel density, it manages to give out some of the best visuals and depth perception VR has to offer. By parts, I honestly couldn't even compute how so very believable everything looked. Again, I got a few audio cutoffs during my playthrough, but strangely these were a lot less frequent than those I got with Arizona Sunshine. On average, every 10 minutes the audio would go silent for about 3 seconds, then come back. Since VIVE did finally fix this problem, this isn't an issue I'll have to deal with anymore, but I felt it was worth mentioning if I'm going to be describing my experience with this kit in its full integrity. The verdict for Skyrim VR was very good. I had an actual blast playing the game, and that playthrough really made the Cosmos grow on me some more. The only real worry I was left with is that head strap's comfort, which I had improved by paying more attention to tightness, but was also hoping I could improve some more over time, because towards the end of the run I was starting to feel the forehead strap more than I wanted to. A little over 1 month went by, during which I didn't get much of a chance to play any games, and I finally found myself with more free time I would spend navigating the Cosmos by loading up Alien Isolation. Now by then, VIVE had pushed at least 3 updates to their runtimes, and sure enough I started noticing the improvements, even with this game which doesn't actually make use of the motion controllers. The first thing I wanted to see is the basement map in Alien Isolation's Survivor mode. Graphically speaking, this has grown to be my litmus test for any new VR headset I try. Having played this level well over 50 times, having seen this level in 6 other VR headsets, it's become easy for me to use this map as a control to make any kind of comparison, whether it be hardware performance or the graphical fidelity of a new VR headset. It's a slice of gameplay that's become so well engraved in my mind, I know what to look for and I know what I should expect. Again, upon starting a playthrough with the Cosmos, the second I spawned into the game, I needed a moment. See, this time I was recording to produce a Let's Play episode for my series, and I had a whole bunch of things I wanted to say at the beginning, but this headset made keeping a train of thought very difficult. I could not stop thinking of how substantially superior this game looked in the Cosmos. This time around, I was straight up stumped, because having seen this level in the Pimax 8K, I was beyond baffled at how the game looked way better in the Cosmos by at least 20%. It makes no sense, right? On paper, the specs of the Pimax exceeded those of the Cosmos. But there it was, right before my eyes, the very best rendition of Alien Isolation I had ever seen in my life. By a long shot. There's another thing that I noticed that was far better than the Pimax, and every other headset I had used with this game before. Alien Isolation has a lot of small text in its heads-up display and its menu interface, and with most previous headsets, while the text was readable, you'd often have to squint to really make out some of it. In the Pimax 8K, the text was unreadable to the point where the words looked like little alien barcodes rather than actual strings of letters. Fuck's sake, at the end screen, even the large completion time readout was impossible to decipher in the Pimax 8K. With the Cosmos, not only was everything much easier to read, but most of the text looked actually sharp and crisp. It's the first time in this game that I can quickly, carelessly read my ammo count, read my Survivor mode objectives, and even read all the small text in the Survivor mode end screen. If I thought I was imagining things with image detail, well now I could rest assured that I was seeing this for real, since improved text readability is a direct sign of increased pixel density. Not only did I have an absolute blast playing this map for the nth time, but for the first time in a long time I was treated to an actual jump scare. Alien Isolation isn't the kind of game to do this often. Its horror is far more atmospheric and rooted in suspense, but sometimes everything falls perfectly in place and the game simply surprises you in the most shocking way possible. I know this has nothing to do with the hardware, but it's just a sign that again, I really let the game I'm playing absorb me. I was actually surprised about the audio here. It really wasn't easy to tell that the integrated headphones on the Cosmos are bad. I'm assuming this is because the spectrum of frequencies of the sounds you most often hear in this game fall in line with the headphone's optimal frequencies, but not only did the poor headphone quality not cross my mind during this playthrough, but I was fully able to play this game by ear, something you absolutely must do if you hope to have any success with this title. and I could make out even the slightest detail in the audio. Sure, the headphones are not good, but I think what served me well here is their overall loudness and their ability to deliver faint sounds just as well as very loud ones. No, this does not forgive the headphone quality. Just grab these and play music in them and you'll see what I mean. But despite their shortcomings, they can still show a strong point or two. If the image clarity was good, it went hand in hand with this amazingly realistic stereoscopic 3D depth perception. Originally, back in 2014, with the experimental VR support in Alien Isolation, this game's world scale was too small, with everything feeling about 20% smaller than it should be. When the Mother VR patch was released in 2017, eventually this was improved a lot, to the point where now scales and sizes feel right. This really did kick the game up a notch because now the alien really does feel like it's 9 feet tall, and the environments feel like the imposing large space-dwelling enclosures they're supposed to be. Since Mother VR also patched a lot of visual effects like smoke and reflections, this has gone a long way to make depth perception feel even more real. The Cosmos takes this into another universe with its image clarity, which further improves the stereoscopic 3D and thus makes things even more believable. This is probably some of the best depth I've ever seen in VR imagery to date. One thing that I was able to notice was the complete absence of audio cutoffs. It was clear to me that these runtime updates had been paying off because obviously I already had one issue less to worry about. It's funny how it took me quite a while to notice it wasn't happening anymore. The game captivated me so much that I was forgetting to pay attention to a lot of the details, being too worked up with playing the game itself. This is overall a very good sign, by the way, because it means the Cosmos is doing what it's supposed to, taking me into another world in VR and doing it extremely well. Since I've bought all the Survivor Mode map DLCs, I figured I'd continue my Let's Play episode beyond just playing the basement and loaded a map I hadn't played before, Scorched Earth. All in all, I went on for about an hour and 40 minutes total, a lot longer than I had planned to play for, and I had a blast the entire time. Since this is seated VR and involves much less movement, I didn't even feel the forehead strap discomfort this time around. Alien Isolation with the Cosmos was simply an absolute delight, so much so that I didn't even think of its tight field of view once. That playthrough is now listed in the Alien Isolation Let's Play series, and I do invite you to watch it. I'll be putting a link to that video in the description. In order to have enough information to compile a first impressions video, I had to launch into the Cosmos, going to orbit one more time. And by the way, I hope these crappy Cosmos puns didn't bother you throughout this. I mean, I could show myself the door, but in that case, it would mean the end of the review. I apologize for the shitty puns. There, I think we're good. Okay, so I decided Fallout 4 VR would make things come full circle as far as I know my VR. See, this isn't a game I got to try with a shit ton of different headsets like Alien Isolation, but it's one I can credit for making room scale VR grow on me much more than it had before I had started playing this. Sure, I always thought room scale was cool, but I love me some seated VR with mouse and keyboard more than anything still to this day. However, Fallout 4 VR is the first game that really made me appreciate this technology at its fullest. I may take issue with some of this game's mechanics, notably the glitches and the way it handles hit detection and probability, but truth is, every single time I've launched the VR version of this game, I thoroughly enjoyed my session, each time making new, special memories that will stick with me for a long time. This would be an easy test for the Cosmos. If I enjoy my playthrough just as much as I did with the other kits, or more, then this new system would be doing its job properly. First thing I have to mention is this is the second game after Skyrim VR that required some sort of patch for the controllers to register properly. Out of the box, Fallout 4 VR will also detect the Cosmos as a standard HTC Vive kit, and thus, thumbsticks and ABXY buttons won't respond properly. This time around, I found another Steam forum post in which a user named Fink posted a replacement OpenVR API DLL file that could simply be swapped in the game's folder. This DLL made the game detect the VIVE Cosmos' controllers as if they were Oculus Touch. And with this fix, unlike Skyrim VR, all the button prompts were correct as well. No repeat button press issues, no mapping problems. After this fix, as far as I knew, this game worked perfectly with these controllers. I'm going to post a link to the Steam forum thread in question in case some of you are experiencing the same problem. With my controllers now working perfectly, I embarked on what would be yet another part in my Fallout 4 VR Let's Play series. Of course, just like every game I tried with the Cosmos before this one, I had to stop to appreciate how so very defined this game looked in the Cosmos. By now it was becoming very obvious to me that the image clarity I'd been getting went far beyond just the way one game renders its output. This headset really does have the highest pixel density I have ever seen. This is a far cry from my playthrough with the Pimax, where the looks of this game disappointed the hell out of me. With specs that are supposedly much lower than the Pimax, the Cosmos was suddenly giving me the complete opposite results. Image detail so goddamn good that I could make out aliasing not produced by the VR screens, but rather aliasing produced by the game itself. Yeah, Fallout 4 has a lot of tiny, gritty detail, and the edges of fine objects like vines, grass, and distant trees will tend to shimmer. And this is going to sound strange, but it's actually nice to see you're looking at aliasing within the game's image itself, rather than having aliasing due to limited screen resolution. One thing I was very interested in trying once more with this kit is gunplay. I wanted to see if those updates delivered what they promised. Sure enough, early on in the playthrough I found myself in a tough spot with a lot of ghouls, and I got to try this out at its fullest. In fact, through the entire play I had quite a few opportunities to try all sorts of shootings, from the hip, with steady aim, from close range, from far away, and this is the first time where I could safely say that this tracking was behaving like almost all other VR kits out there. There isn't one single time where I could blame tracking for anything that happened in the game. Clearly, these updates have been doing the Cosmos a lot of good. There's a point in the recording where I stopped to try and demonstrate the tracking issues of the Cosmos. I first demonstrated what happens when you put your controller too close to the headset, and immediately I could tell that this issue was slightly improved. Sure, the tracking would fail for about half a second when I put my hand up to my face, but this was a far better result than the first time I had tried this with Arizona Sunshine. Next, I tried to demonstrate what happens when you put the controllers behind one another in a direct line in front of you. And this time, to my great surprise, I was unable to actually make the tracking freak out like it had done with the bow in Skyrim or the two-handed guns in Arizona Sunshine. If this issue is not completely gone, I think it's been improved to the point where it'll be fully perfected in a few updates to come. Speaking of issues that are gone, this is another playthrough where the audio did not cut off on me once. By now it was safe to assume the problem is completely fixed. In just a few short weeks, I was surprised to notice how far along these runtimes have come. Fallout 4 did its thing, completely reeling me into its world. It became very easy to forget about the hardware I was using, as if the game world around me was being brought into existence without any headset or controllers, just me freely playing a game that's constantly captivating me. I think the only real issue that remained here is the comfort of that head strap. For this playthrough, it was a lot better than what I felt with Arizona Sunshine, and a slight bit better than what I had with Skyrim, but it still left a bit to be desired. Shortly before ending the recording, I could start feeling that forehead strap wear me down. I kept adjusting the tightness as I went, but I still couldn't find that perfect balance between fit and comfort. While writing this, I'm trying to think of anything else that really went wrong, and nothing's coming up. I'm even re-watching bits and pieces of that video so I can refresh my mind, trying to make sure I didn't miss anything, and all I see is me having fun, getting lost in the game world, and sometimes outright praising the kit. My tracking never failed me, my aim was as steady as I'd expected, the game ran beautifully the whole entire way. This and Alien Isolation were the two best experiences I've had in this headset so far, likely a testament to how much the updates have improved everything. Again, this is another recording that was made into a Let's Play episode, so I'll have a link to that in the description of this video if you feel like watching it. So now, all that's left to do is give you my verdict. Do I think the VIVE Cosmos is good? Is this headset worth getting? Is VIVE making a worthy entry into second generation VR? My short answer to that is yes, but of course this is a review video, so I think I'll have to expand on that a little more. See, the Cosmos is an expensive kit. It's a gamble you're going to make unless you get to try it out before buying it. It's VIVE's first shot at inside-out tracking, which is an attractive feature provided it's done absolutely right. This is where I think they kind of shit the bed, and the shame here is that most of the problems they had were easily preventable. See, I can understand that a manufacturer needs to release their hardware to the general public in order to get a larger user base and thus manage to fix the last of the problems with their system. But in this case, the problems people were having were beyond obvious. It would take only one tester to realize that the headset had tracking issues, and from what I've seen these updates do, it's clear that the runtime developers were very capable of fixing most of the issues in a short amount of time. VIVE should have done themselves a big favor and waited one more month before releasing the kit, thus giving them enough time to iron out the final problems. The result of not doing this will have a lasting impact on the VIVE Cosmos' lifespan and could go as far as affecting VIVE as a whole on the long run. See, when they released with the tracking issues they had, this produced a lot of bad press for the Cosmos. Press that could otherwise have been completely avoided had they polished up those runtimes before release. I find it's quite a shame actually, because those problems not only produced a lot of preventable bad press, but quite a few people returned their units thinking the kit was no good. I think it's safe to say, now almost 2 months after the headset's launch, that the tracking has gone from subpar to actually decent. Sure, there's a few problems left to address, and at the pace they've been going, I fully expect this kit will be able to compete with even the Oculus Quest in terms of inside-out tracked motion controllers by New Year's. It kind of reminds me of the launch of Oculus Touch in 2016, where at the beginning you could experience anything from terrible tracking all the way to having your external trackers completely disconnect mid-play, thus ruining your session, but a few months down the line they improved the system to the point where it became, in my opinion, the best motion controller tracking system on the market. Will Cosmos go from worst to best? I don't know about that, but I'm absolutely certain that it will eventually function just as good as you'd expect any kit to track. In addition to the updates that keep improving the tracking, the kit's controllers themselves, purely as input devices, are vastly superior to the old god-awful VIVE wands. See, Cosmos owners will soon be able to get an accessory to turn the headset into an externally tracked one, making use of the traditional VIVE-based stations instead of its own 6 inside-out cameras. But the catch is, if you use this headset with external tracking, you'll be forced to revert to using the abominable VIVE wands. So let me put it this way. I would rather go back to the way the Cosmos controllers were tracking on day one without all the updates that brought so many improvements, rather than have to revert to using those heinous, disastrous VIVE wands. Having thumbsticks instead of dissident trackpads, multiple buttons, grip triggers that don't feel like they're stuck in a layer of superglue when you press them, and controllers that feel like they're not going to break if you as much as look at them wrong is a huge relief. I'd honestly rather deal with intermittent tracking issues rather than have to completely downgrade my ability to communicate with the game I'm playing. I really like what they've done with the Cosmos controllers in terms of design, button mapping, and robustness. I should have made a note that the Cosmos controllers require 2 AA batteries for each controller, so 4 in total. This is more than one should expect, I admit. However, while I heard some people report that the battery life was somewhere around an hour or 2 maximum, I can attest that this is simply false. I recorded over 6 hours of gameplay for this video, over 4.5 of which were played with the motion controllers, and all this was done on a single set of batteries with enough energy left to spare for another session lasting over an hour. I don't know where this short battery life complaint came from, but I reckon maybe they got a bad batch of batteries or unknowingly managed to leave their controllers powered on while unattended. I have no complaints about the battery life. The real negative of the VIVE Cosmos for me is that head strap. I really can't seem to be able to find that perfectly comfortable spot. It's either I have it on too loose or I tighten it enough that it actually starts hurting my forehead. This is actually a worry for me because I'm one to be able to play in VR for several hours at a time, and a problem like this really will put sticks in my wheels when it comes to regular operation. I don't deem the discomfort a deal breaker. I did say earlier that this is nothing as bad as the first Oculus Rift with its stock face foam, but this being the second generation of VR, I really do expect head strap comfort issues to have been fully worked out, and clearly, this isn't the case. Now, I have to point out this kit's strongest aspect, and I don't think you realize how much I really appreciate it. The Cosmos does have a tighter than average field of view, but screw this. I don't care. I don't care because I repeat, for the trillionth time in this video, this is the highest pixel density I have seen in virtual reality to date, and I'm absolutely blown away by how good everything I played looked in this little machine. I've been dying for a real resolution increase in VR. Not just a half-assed increase like the Rift S gave us. No, a real, substantial increase. And the Cosmos has just given it to me. This is the kind of positive that makes things like those terrible headphones easy to forget. In my opinion, the headset's displays alone justify the price tag of the entire kit. Some people have brought up the fact that these RGB displays have slightly brighter black levels, trying to pass this off as a legitimate negative. But honestly, I can't give half a shit about slightly brighter black levels. These screens are so very much superior that the clarity you get outweighs any ridiculous little nitpick like brighter black levels. All in all, I think the VIVE Cosmos is an excellent VR kit. I really didn't get first impressions as bad as some other reviewers out there, so I'm kind of left wondering what the hate was all about. Like I said, it's unfortunate they launched the kit with runtimes that allowed for so many problems when it comes to tracking, and I think they hurt themselves in the long run by releasing the system a month too early. In my opinion, by now, if you're looking for a very high image resolution, a setup free of external trackers, and a good overall robust kit that will last through this entire generation of VR, the Cosmos is an excellent pick, provided you don't mind the higher than average price tag. At this point, it's clear that the Rift S, probably one of the worst entries in second generation VR, can't compete with the Cosmos. This only leaves the Oculus Quest. If Quest's Link technology works as well as they're promising, then that kit could probably give the Cosmos some fierce competition, but I've yet to try that solution myself, so it remains to be seen whether it would be a viable alternative. As a standalone, the Quest simply can't compete because its software ecosystem feels like a prison. This is where the plot thickens. See, my employer needed to borrow my Cosmos kit for 1 week in mid-October because they were going to give a demo and wanted to do it with the most current hardware possible. Having missed out on early pre-orders, they turned to me to get their hands on one, and sure enough, since they've lent me so many different headsets over time, it was my turn to do them a favor. When they completed their demo, having used the kit long enough to get a good opinion of it, the little Cosmos had grown on them. Everyone who used it had a really great experience with it, so I figured I'd make them an offer to buy it off my hands since they would have a lot of use for it. They immediately accepted, having fallen in love with the kit. Wait, what? Did I just say I sold my Cosmos kit? Yes, that's exactly what I did. I sold my Cosmos kit to my employer. For one, it turns out it's the perfect kit for them. Current, portable, and simple. And for two, I am at this point still on the fence about which kit I want as my second generation VR kit. If I want another VIVE Cosmos in the future, I can simply buy one. I didn't lose a penny in this transaction. But more importantly, I was willing to wait a little longer to see if Valve would finally get off their asses and start shipping the Index to Canada. I've heard way too many good things about that kit, and if I could get a chance to get my hands on one, I would. And then, it finally happened. Just a few days after I sold my Cosmos kit, in a display of perfect coincidence, on November 21, Valve suddenly put up the index for sale in a few more countries, and this included Canada. I jumped on the store page as quickly as I could and ordered the full kit, which took 8 days to finally make it to my doorstep. In a sense, I'm really lucky the timing was this good, and that my employer was so willing to buy the Cosmos off my hands, thus allowing me to take yet another gamble. In the process, I got to fully experience what the Cosmos had to offer, and I'll even have a chance to use it occasionally in the future. Not only will my employer allow me to borrow the kit every now and then, but I'll probably want to do that soon, because while I've already started having my share of fun with the index and discovering even more awesome possibilities, I find myself missing the little Cosmos, a sign that it's grown on me more than I realized. I'll really want to revisit the system whenever I get a chance. Don't get me wrong here, I didn't hand off my Cosmos because I didn't like it. I handed it off because the timing was just right. My employer needed the kit quickly, and I had already started lending it to them, and selling it would give me a chance to explore other options in the second generation of VR. I still stand by the fact that I really like the Cosmos, and I think it can make a great VR kit that will last a long time. Of course, I kinda just spoiled what I'm going to be doing for my next First Impressions review. That's right, it's soon going to be the Valve Index's turn at this. I'm glad I got to try the Cosmos first, because now I have a baseline for comparison, and it's one that I thought was quite good and may actually be hard to compete with in some aspects. The Valve Index will have its share of challenges, so I'll be starting a series of long sessions with it soon. You've been watching Stereo 3D Productions. I hope you enjoyed this First Impressions review of the VIVE Cosmos, which in my opinion is the first kit I've tried that really feels like a second generation headset. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.